Well, good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's Xtalks webinar. Today's talk is entitled The Benefits of Traceability and Blockchain Technology for the Food Industry. My name is Sumaya, and I'll be your Xtalks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes with time for a question and answer session with our speaker. This webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars really work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speaker throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and I'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, you can contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please also note that this event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Aptean, who developed the content for this presentation. Aptean is a global provider of mission-critical, industry-specific software solutions. Aptean's purpose-built ERP and supply chain management solutions help address the unique challenges facing process and discrete manufacturers, distributors, and other focused organizations. Over 4,000 organizations in more than 20 industries across 54 countries trust Aptean solutions at their core to assist with running their operations. Now, I'd like to have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for today's event, and that's Jack Payne. Jack Payne is a VP of Product Management and Solutions Consulting at Aptean, focusing on food and beverage enterprise resource planning. Payne originally joined the organization nearly 30 years ago with Ross ERP and spent much of that time working closely with manufacturers to understand their challenges and tailor the development of the product accordingly. Over the years, Payne has collaborated with customers, industry analysts, and developers to create a strong vision for the ERP solutions and has become a well-respected industry resource for best practices and future technology advancements. So now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over the presentation. Ready? You can go ahead and get started.
Greetings, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today's session, we'll be talking about traceability throughout the food and beverage supply chain. I like to refer to that as farm to fork, but just give you a little bit more about some of my background. As I have been working in the technology industry and specifically ERP and specifically food and beverage companies, I've actually kind of lost count of all the number of companies I've worked with over the years. I know it's in the hundreds, and just by estimation, I know it's in excess of 1,000. And that has been actually in 5 different continents, primarily in North America, but also in Latin America and South America, various areas of Europe and UK, South America and APAC, primarily in Japan, China, and Malaysia, in those areas. Working with companies headquartered in each of those areas, as well as companies that may be global companies that could be headquartered in the US, maybe with operations in EMEA, operations in APAC or Latin America. So thanks for your time today with us. Now, our agenda, we'll first spend a few minutes just reviewing and talking about the supply chain within food and beverage, all the way from farm to fork. Then we'll talk a little bit about some of the history, but more importantly about what are the regulations that are facing us today. You know, industry-related regulations as well as government-related regulations that you need to comply with. And then we'll get into a more complex example of traceability requirements within food manufacturing as part of the farm to fork. But then we'll conclude that we're talking about full traceability over the supply chain and how blockchain technology can be used to enable that requirement. And then, as we said earlier, we'll finish up with a Q&A session at the end. That during the session, you can enter your questions via chat. So this is a statement that I've thought about and I've pondered a lot. that all food comes from the farm. And I have tried to come up with an example that this is not the case, but I have not been able to do that. So when I think about it, all the different types of foods that we have, if I think about what comes out of the earth, what's planted and grows, you know, they're crops, they're plants, they're trees, you know, that's where we get our fruits, our vegetables, our nuts. But then I thought, well, what about salt? Some of the minerals that we have as part of our food. Well, that comes from the earth too, with that. Animals provide a lot of the different products for us, various meat products, poultry and fish, depending upon how you consider that. But also animals provide products to us as well, primarily milk and eggs. So when I start thinking through, is there any food that we eat that does not come from the farm? I can't really think of an example with that. So to me, that then really reinforces the need for having traceability from where the food originates at the beginning, at the farm, all the way to where we consume that at the fork. So let's just real simplistically look at what this supply chain looks like. And I know there are multiple variations to it, but we've established that everything starts from a farm. It may not be a traditional farm. It may be a non-traditional farm. It may be a individual's farm, but it starts from the earth or from an animal that's part of the earth. But in our traditional model, you know, we typically have growers that are cultivating the land, growing crops, growing whatever product they're producing. There may be packers that are involved in packing up product, particularly in produce, vegetable-related areas are doing that. And then the next step from the farm may be going to the factory. Now, I do realize a lot of farm products may go directly to a distributor. They may go through a wholesaler. They may go, again, depending upon the type farm and the type channels, it may go directly to a restaurant that goes to the table and to the fork. Let's talk about all the possible steps. And in the traditional model, it now goes to a factory for processing that, for making products out of it. And this is maybe a very simple process where maybe certain products are graded and cut, frozen, canned. It goes into the container that they're being sold in, or maybe a more complex process where there's mixing and cooking and multiple ingredients going together with this throughout a factory. Typically referred to as processors and manufacturers. You know, most food that comes from a factory does not directly go to the table, so to speak, or to the fork. Most of the times that goes to a distribution center, where that is typically a food service distribution center, or if it's going into the retail chain, it would be a retail distribution center, but some type of warehousing distribution service. And trying to keep with the theme of farm, factory, food service, and now fork, so you can kind of see a theme going on here. Now from the food service, from the distributor, it may go to a restaurant, it may go to an institution. A lot of times I forget about institutions. In today's environment of the new normal that many of us are living in, a lot of those institutions are not serving food. More of that's happening in the homes today. Most of the food that's coming from the table and with the fork at the home is typically coming through that retail channel through the grocery. But if we do look at the four major stops along the way, or four major points within that food and beverage supply chain, start at the farm, to a factory, to a distributor, and then to the place that the consumer acquires that food through a restaurant or institution or through a home with that.
Thank you, Jack. That does bring us to our first poll question. Audience members, you should be seeing that poll question on your screen. So that question is, what area of the food supply chain are you interested in? So your options are farmers, growers, and packers, or that's manufacturing, processors, or that's distribution, food service, or retailers, or it could also be grocery, restaurants, institution. So audience members, you can just go ahead and click on the option that suits you best. And once again, that question is, what area of the food supply chain are you interested in? So you can go ahead and click on one option that suits you best. Fantastic. So it seems like the majority of audience members have voted. So I'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you as well. And the results are as follows. So 55% of audience members voted for manufacturing processors, followed by 25% of audience members who voted for farms, growers, and packers. And then distribution was at 15%. And finally, grocery, restaurants, and institution was last at 5%. So thank you for participating. And Jack, back to you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't think those results were surprising to me. That was kind of what I was predicting or expecting with that. Now, let's talk about recall capabilities with this. So how do we do this? And I always like to go back to the saying that I've heard throughout my life, that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link in the chain. So we need to make sure that all of the links in our food supply chain are strong in there to support that full traceability, to trace it, from the consumer, from the fork, back to the farm with this. So to me, that is step one, is making sure that we have the proper procedures, the proper solutions in place, each one of the steps within our supply chain. Step two of this, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, is implementing proper standards. And GS1 standards is one of those standards, and able to identify the products and also to assist in barcode scanning. And then step three is, how do we utilize blockchain technology to synchronize records from each individual node within the supply chain, so that we now can have this, what I refer to as this utopia, or this perfect world of fork to farm traceability. So let's start out by talking a little bit about traceability and recall and some of the history and regulations around this. And I know that we have a global audience today, and not trying to be just US centric, but talking about the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, was created in 1906. It replaced a previous government agency, but there was a book that was released called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair in the early 1900s, and it was about the Chicago stockyards, the meatpacking area, where there was not a good place to work. Not only was it not a good place for the workers to work, it was also, as I understand, inhumane treatment for the animals. Also, I think there were some unfair business practices that happened. And so there was a lot of public sentiment, a lot of public feedback from this book. And this is what basically created the FDA. Their original mission was to prohibit interstate commerce in adulterated and misbranded food. Well, their guidelines and their mission has changed over the years, but this is still a key mission. And I would say not just interstate, but intrastate commerce, any commerce in food. We want food that is, safe and healthy to eat for us and branded properly. The first major recall that the FDA was involved in was improperly canned olives in 1920 with botulism. Later, Thanksgiving holiday within North America in November, there was a recall with cranberries that were laced with a cancer-creating weed killer. So as pesticides were placed on the crops with this, of the growing of the cranberries, those actually had this weed killer in it. That was another recall. And I heard stories, from my ancestors about not having, cranberry sauce, which was a very popular condiment to go with the turkey that was typically eaten at the Thanksgiving meal in North America. As we go forward and we start looking more at technology, and MRP systems was the predecessor to ERP systems. So in the 1980s, most of the ERP systems were discrete oriented. So people that were in food and beverage tried to use those. They would have homegrown systems, bespoke systems. But if you're using an MRP system in the 80s, what you did find out is that these systems started providing lot control, not traceability, but it gave you the ability to record the lot that was received from the supplier. It gave you the ability to see what inventory you had of which lots. And as you're maintaining the inventory, you would record what lot was issued to a production order, what lot came from a production order. As you sold those and shipped those goods to your customers, what lots went to the customers. But it didn't connect all the dots. So you had all the pieces, almost like an Excel spreadsheet or almost like paper records, that if you had to go through traceability, you could pull all the records and go through it, but it did not provide, lot control traceability as we know today with this. Process manufacturing systems, primarily focused on food and beverage, came out in the late 80s, early 90s, and there were, a handful of first generation systems that were focused on food and beverage. This is the first place where it really connected the dots. So it gave us full traceability from that supplier receipt to that customer shipment. So this was now the shifting of technology to enable traceability in a formal electronic system. And so this was in the early years that I was working in food and beverage and working in technology and ERP systems. And looking back, what I found at this point in time, that the forward-thinking food manufacturers adopted and implemented these systems primarily internally for brand protection. I don't want to name any specific company names, but I did work with companies who had what was considered a premium product in the marketplace. And because it was a premium product, they could charge more for the product. I'm sure their costs to produce that premium product were also greater, but they knew that if there was a recall that occurred that they could not contain, that would happen to recall everything they had produced over a period of time, that this would basically be a liability for them. So they were forward thinking and said, we want to prevent this from happening, and we need systems to give us the ability to have a recall, to maintain a recall in a very timely manner for our brand protection with this. Well, also in the 90s, there were a number of high-profile recalls that occurred, and the Consumer Goods Forum in 2000 created the Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI. You probably heard about this. This was one of the areas where a lot of standards started coming into place, and these standards were industry-related standards for food safety. And part of this was certification. There were 8 different certification bodies, so to speak. It didn't matter which one of the bodies that you used for certification purposes. Within North America, the 2 most common happen to be SQF, or Safe Quality Foods. There are various levels of certification, level 1, 2, and 3, level 3 being the highest or best. There's also BRC, or British Retail Consortium, as well as 6 other certifications that were recognized by the Global Food Safety Initiative. And so what happened with this, a lot of the retailers adopted these standards, adopted these requirements. Walmart, being one of the leading retailers in food and beverage, told their suppliers that if you're going to continue to be a supplier to Walmart, you have to be certified by the standards from the GFSI, or the Global Food Safety Initiative. So I could say that this was, quote, voluntary. A company did not have to do this, but if you wanted to sell your products into certain customers, yes, you did have to do this. Also, it was also another positive thing. Maybe you had a customer that did not require it, but it was also a very competitive and a very good thing to have, to say that you did have certification from this. Now, I have worked with companies over the years that were not GFSI certified because their channel did not require it. And 2 of these companies I can think of Both of them very high profile, thought as very high quality companies. One is a grocery store chain that has their own food manufacturing facilities. And I know I've been through those manufacturing facilities very many times. I've seen their records, and I felt very comfortable as a consumer buying and eating anything that came from their stores, knowing that they had procedures in place. It's just that their procedures were internal procedures that had not been recognized by GFSI. Also, another company that had their own stores that made a certain line of products, same situation. Where internally I felt they had met whatever all the food safety standards that were necessary with this. So in 2011, early January, President Obama of the United States signed the Food Safety Modernization Act, typically referred to as FSMA. And this was focused on prevention. Traceability and recall was also a requirement of this. You know, this gave the FDA organization more leeway, more power in terms of maintaining the food safety of the supply chain, and gave them more power in terms of recalls with this. But the whole focus of this was on prevention. And also, my personal opinion in viewing this was very much in line with the earlier industry regulations from GFSI from this. You know, the basic traceability from GFSI as well as from FSMA was one back and one forward. So if you're one of the 55% of food manufacturers, you know, your regulations now were that you had to be able to trace all of your ingredients, any packaging supplies that touch the product, back to the supplier. You need to be able to trace forward to what customers that you sold that to, one back and one forward with this. This now became mandatory for all food companies in North America or in the US, where in the past, if it was quote, voluntary for GFSI. In 2012, 2013, I attended a conference on the Food Safety Modernization Act. One of the keynote speakers at the conference was from a consulting agency that the FDA had hired to help with the creation of the rules as well as the deployment and implementation of all those regulations. And during one of the networking sessions, I had an opportunity to talk with the keynote speaker. And one of the things we talked about was not just about the Food Safety Modernization Act, but what was the vision for the future? You know, what was going to be done to go more than the one back and one forward, so that we had that full traceability across the supply chain that we desperately need to ensure safe food all the way from the farm to the fork. At this point in time, this was not on their radar. I don't know if it's on their radar at this point in time, but you know, this is something we will be talking about today with this. You're probably aware of the Food Safety Modernization Act. It not only just affects food companies within the U.S., it affects imports and exports of food from the U.S. as well with this. And there have been 7 major rules that have come out of the Food Safety Modernization Act, still being implemented, still being worked through. Companies in North America are still working to comply with the Food Safety Modernization Act.
Thank you, Jack. And that brings us to our second poll question. And that poll question is, audience members, on your screen. And that question is, how did your company handle FSMA compliance? So your options are: food safety plans were previously in place and implemented, or developed food safety plans internally, or that was use consultant for guidance to develop food safety plans, or it could be still developing and implementing food safety plans. So go ahead and click on the option that suits you best. And that question again is, how did your company handle FSMA compliance? And I'll give you 10 more seconds to answer that question, and then I'll go ahead and close that poll. Okay, so it seems like the majority of audience members have voted, so I'll go ahead and close the poll right now and share those results with you as well. And the results are as follows. So developed food safety plans internally was the most at 48%, followed by food safety plans were previously in place and implemented at 33%, and then it was still developing and implementing food safety plans at 14%, and lastly, use consultant for guidance to develop food safety plans at 5%. Thank you for participating, and Jack, back to you.
Okay, thank you. And those results are very common to what I've seen in working with companies, and it also makes me feel very comfortable that many of you already had food safety plans before FSMA, and you developed those internally with that. So let's look at probably the most complex link in the chain of developing traceability. We'll talk about one of the favorite examples I like to talk about being a frozen pizza factory. This gives us lots of opportunities with this, where we have dairy products coming in the form of cheese. We have fresh vegetables or frozen vegetables coming in the way of toppings. We have meat products coming in with this. So a lot of different combinations of sources of products from this. So we'll just come up with a manufacturer who's 100 million annual sales, 250 employees. All their ingredients and packaging comes from multiple suppliers. One of their key things they're famous for is their own signature pizza sauce. This is why people buy their pizzas. They purchase the dough for the crust. They purchase their meat and their veggies pre-sliced. They assemble and bake pizzas on a continuous line. They individually freeze before packaging. They sell to both food service and retail grocery chains, and they ship to these distribution centers. So as they've gone through and looked at what their requirements are, they want to make sure they have a system that only allows them to purchase ingredients from qualified suppliers. They want to record inbound logistics information in terms of carrier, temperature, sanitation. They want to be able to record supplier and internal lot numbers at receipt. They want to be able to get certificate analysis, do their own incoming quality test at receipt. They want to be able to track every transaction by lot number. They want to be able to do this through barcode scanning, whether it's an inventory or warehouse movement, whether it's inputs or outputs for manufacturing, transfers to other warehouses or distribution centers, shipments to customers. And in doing this, they need to account for every ounce, every piece of a lot. So if they've received in 1,000 pounds of a particular topping produce, they need to be able to account for all 1,000 pounds from a traceability standpoint. They also want to be able to do quality tests throughout the process, pre-production, in process, post-production, as well as be able to support tests for food safety. They need to record what they've shipped to the customers, as well as record the lots, record the outbound logistics information. And they want to be able to do traceability backward from the customer and shipments, as well as forward from receipts and ingredients with this. So they put together the requirements. They've said, here's now the profile of what we're looking for. We need an ERP system designed for food manufacturing that allows us to manage our inventory by lot. We need to manage our shelf life expiration dates. We need to have quality built into it with quality tests and results, full trace and recall. But because of the channels that we sell into, there's very complex pricing rules, there's very complex promotions that goes with this. And we have some fairly complex and robust product costing requirements as well. And we want to add all this together and be able to report on and analyze our profitability by channel, by product, by line from this. So as they went through the requirements, they looked at the best practices. Here is what I would suggest to them, is that they need to find a system that can give them the ability to trace backward from a customer, but not just from a customer, either based upon a product and lot or date code, based upon a ship date to a customer, based upon either that ship note or bill of lading or invoice, or based upon the customer PO. Any one of those methods of tracing backwards. Also, they should have the ability to trace forward very similarly, not just from a supplier, but from a supplier lot or date code. from a receipt date from a supplier, from that purchase order number to that supplier, or that receiving number from that supplier with that. But also what I call bidirectional tracing. So if you remember the profile of this company is they made their own signature pizza sauce. So that being an intermediate product, you need to be able to trace from that pizza sauce back to the ingredients that went into it, as well as to all the different styles of pizza that it went into, by production order, by production date, by input product or lot, or output product and lot with this, to give them the full capability and flexibility from this. So, here's the vision of what a solution could look like for this company that would give them all the capabilities to meet all the FSMA regulations, the GFSI regulations for one back and one forward, but to provide all the necessary foundation to support blockchain type technology for traceability across the supply chain. So for example, they may go in and look for a shipment of a particular product. It may be they have a particular ship note, it may be a particular customer, it just may be a particular product over a period of time, and get a list of all the matches from that. And then they may say, let's take this particular shipment to this customer, and now let's view this. I like to see pictures. I like to view things. So if I could view the traceability in a graphical view, I could see this very easily. In this view, where we're looking at this pepperoni pizza that's been shipped out, it's kind of the focus of our view. We can see that it went out through a third-party warehouse distribution center, shipments out to customers from this. We can see we had shipments out directly from our main distribution center warehouse to customers, but also where we can trace it back from the pizza to the dough and to the supplier that provided it, to the cheese and the supplier for the cheese, as well as to the pepperoni that went in onto it, but also back to their signature pizza sauce and all the ingredients of the signature pizza sauce. So to me, this would be the optimum capability solution they had from this, but also given the capability to view information in a table or a grid type of format. So the ability to go in and view their receipts or view their inventory or view their shipments. And one of the things that's has happened recently is there's been notice in terms of geographic, in terms of recall, or in terms of food safety problems with this. So I think it would be a very beneficial capability to have a shipment map with this. And so if we were to use Google Maps for this, show me my distribution center or centers that this product was shipped from, and show me all the customers and the locations this was shipped to. There have been some high-profile recalls from a food safety problem in the U.S. in recent years that were concentrated in certain geographic areas. So being able to view this geographically, I think, is going to be very important in helping to maintain that recall and to know where that particular recall went. For example, if we were viewing this and we had a particular customer or consumer inquiry that maybe came from the state of Washington, but we saw that no product that was shipped into that area that was in this particular recall we're looking at, I think we could feel pretty sure this was an isolated incident, not something part of a normal recall from this. But this is looking back, but I think also we need that capability looking forward. So if we change the focus and say, we've gone back through this particular scenario, we've done the analysis, and there was a problem with the onions that were used in this. So the next question is, now let's trace the onions forward, knowing that this is a common ingredient that could go in lots of different products and lots of different pizzas. Let's look at where all those onions went with this. And we could see this went into potentially hundreds of shipments into many, many different products, not just pepperoni pizza, but veggie pizzas and cheese pizzas and all the different types of pizzas you could think of that would have onions, and the pizza sauce could potentially go into something like this, as well as show us all the shipments, as well as let's broaden the shipment map and see that not only did this go in more areas locally, but maybe this went internationally as well from this. So to me, this would be what I would see as an optimum solution for this frozen pizza manufacturer who distributes their product through both food service and through retail.
Thank you, Jack. And that brings us to our third poll question. So audience members, you should be seeing that on your screen. And that question is, what method do you use for trace and recall? So that's ERP solutions for food and beverage, or that's other solutions. So that's ERP, MES, other, or Excel spreadsheets or Access database, or that's paper-based systems. So once again, that question is, what method do you use for trace and recall? Okay, and I'll give you 10 more seconds to answer that poll question, and then we'll go ahead and close that poll. All right, fantastic. So it seems like the majority of audience members have voted, so I'll go ahead and close the poll. And the results are as follows. So other solution was the most at 50%, followed by ERP solution for food and beverage at 25%. And then there was a tie for Excel spreadsheets and paper-based systems at 13%. So thank you for participating, and back to you, Jack.
Okay, thank you. And you're probably aware that the FSMA regulations do not mandate what method is used for traceability. Any of those four methods are suitable as long as you can provide traceability within the timeline that's specified in a reasonable time with this. So now let's get into all the links in the supply chain of how do we do that traceability and recall. And this time we'll use an example starting with a tomato farm in California that tomatoes from that farm actually wind up in food products in homes and restaurants across the United States with this. So again, just taking a review of our food supply chain from the farm to the fork. And so I'll just kind of ask the rhetorical question: what does a truck driver at a truck stop restaurant in Bismarck, North Dakota, have in common with a family eating a pizza dinner in Atlanta, Georgia? So if you're not familiar with the U.S. geography, there's a couple, 3 days of travel time by car between those two locations, two completely diverse situations. So what's in common with this? And you probably are already thinking ahead. You probably already have the answer in place. But let's just look at what the journey that those tomatoes might go on from this farm that we have in California that's growing the farms. They would have many customers they would sell to, produce distributors, food manufacturers, but one of the companies that they sell to is a tomato paste company in the Arizona area. And so basically by taking the water out of the tomatoes, providing it into a paste area, this now provides an intermediate product that they're now selling to other food manufacturing companies. Two of their largest customers happens to be a pizza sauce manufacturer in Texas, as well as a ketchup manufacturer in the Washington, Idaho area from this. If we look at, well, where does the pizza sauce go next? It now goes to a pizza factory up in the Chicago area. And people in the Midwest, Chicago, very much like their pizzas, the Chicago deep dish style pizza. From that, they sell both to retail and food service with this. There may be a regional food service, up in the Midwest that we see that they are servicing various restaurants in the upper Midwest, as well as the retailers have various stores around the Southeast with this. At the same time, we go through the pizza sauce and pizza restaurant journey. The tomato ketchup manufacturer is also selling to retailers in the Southwest area, as well as food service distributor also in this upper Northwest area from this. Now we could continue filling this in, and we would basically have, I think, the full map could be blanketed with this, as well as possibly into Mexico and possibly into Canada with products that came from tomatoes that originated in this farm within California. But we have a family who sits down to their family pizza night in Atlanta, Georgia area, enjoying the frozen pizza they bought at their local grocery store, as well as a truck driver who's in the process of delivering his load. He stopped in Bismarck, North Dakota. He's eating it looks like a super giant sandwich here that I'm sure has ketchup on it that came through the food service that came from the ketchup manufacturer that we saw up in the Northwest with that. So let's say we had a situation where the family in Atlanta had a concern about the pizza they were eating with this, and they contacted the local health department. Health department got involved. It was very easy for the family to tell what store they bought the pizza from. From that store, we could follow this back to which distribution center this product came from. The family still had the box or the carton this product came in, so they had the date code. From the date code, we knew what lot number it was. That distribution center could trace that back now to the pizza factory that we had up in the Chicago area. Again, through that date code that we had, the pizza factory could trace its ingredients back. And from the complaint they had, they felt like it was something that was with the pizza sauce as one of the ingredients. And they could trace that lot of pizza sauce that went into that lot of pizza from that pizza sauce manufacturer in Texas. They may have other pizza sauce manufacturers, as well as they may produce some of their own pizza sauce manufacturer. Now, the pizza sauce manufacturer would have multiple ingredients going into it, primary ingredient being the tomato paste. They may have multiple suppliers, but they could trace that back to their tomato paste supplier in the Arizona area from this. So we've gone through each of these steps in the chain. Each of us had traceability capabilities to do this. Now that we've traced this back, and we did go through whatever investigation each area, there was investigation done at the tomato paste factory and found that there was a problem with that particular batch of paste they made. Some of it went to the pizza sauce factory, but some of that also they found went to the ketchup factory. And then now we're initiating a recall going forward from the paste factory to the ketchup. As they look at that product, they can trace that forward into products that went into their food service, and the food service distributor can trace that now into products that went out to the truck stop restaurant that now our truck driver enjoyed his large sandwich from. So this is what connects these two families together, is the tomato paste that came from this factory in the Arizona area from this. Well, how long did it take for this response time for the trace and recall? And the typical guideline is a 2-hour response time, but there's also investigation time with this. There's also nights and weekends, but not considering that, just saying if we use that kind of 2-hour thought process, how long did it take to get back from the store to the distribution center? How long did it take to get from the distribution center back to the pizza factory? How long did it take to get from the pizza factory back to the pizza sauce factory? And how long did it take to get from there back to tomato sauce? We add all those up, and we've now got 8 hours to go from the store to the tomato paste factory. I think this is probably the optimum we have with this. But now that we've established a problem in the tomato paste factory, we now have 2 hours in notification of the ketchup, 2 hours to the food service, and now 2 hours to our truck stop. So in total, we have added another 6 hours or 14 hours. That trucker who's eating at that truck stop, he's no longer here. He's probably now in Texas now, wherever he's going with his load with this. So that response time is very key with this. So how do we improve that response time to make that a more immediate or more instant response time from this? And so first of all, we have to have the data to be able to provide the blockchain technology. Part of this is adopting and using standards such as GS1 standards. You're probably familiar with this. You probably know what a global trade item number is, or a G10 number. That is made up of a unique company identifier that GS1 assigns to you. So your company identifier is different than anybody else's. Your item number, you're signing that yourself, and there's typically a check digit with this. So whatever this G10 number is for this particular product is unique. It's a global unique number with this. So if you have this number on products that come in from your suppliers, it may be helpful that you know what the product is, but really there needs to be other information. You know, we're missing things like what's the lot number, what's the quantity. And so this is where there's been things called application identifiers, or the numbers in brackets with this. So you have a GS1-128 barcode that not only has a G10 number, but it also has other information with this. It can be in any order. And basically, as you scan this, we basically parse this out, or read this, and we can kind of decode this. So if we look at this example with this, we see 01 is the G10 number, which identifies the company and the product. 13 is the packing date of this. There may be an expiration date, there may be a packing date, there may be other dates associated with it. There's a lot number associated with this as well. So that gives us the basic information. But then when you get into certain industries, it's also beneficial to have the weight on this. And there are different application identifiers, whether it's the weight in pounds, the weight in kilos, whether it's quantity in eaches or units with this, and then how many decimal places. So 3202, if we saw this, which tells us also the weight in pounds. So if you're dealing with a lot of times meat products or products with variable weights within cartons, they'll include the application identifier that gives us our serialized cartons with this for our decimal places. So I really see this as now the foundation, that we have a common standard, that we're collecting this information in whatever systems that we're using for providing our own traceability, that now we can communicate with and we can provide this in to blockchain. But why should you use GS1 labels internally? Well, you may be dealing with suppliers that already have this. But if you could require your suppliers to use GS1 labels, it simplifies your receiving process. It's one scan. It increases your efficiency. It reduces error, where someone is not having to key in a date code or key in a lot number with this. You don't have to add your own barcode. You could continue using this GS1 label throughout your process if your solutions, your systems did that. So you can use that for your warehouse and consumption transactions. I know that many of you, particularly in the food manufacturing business, that your customers require GS1 labels. And I've seen companies that would stick the GS1 label in at the end as they were shipping it, only for those customers that required it. Well, this can also cause a problem as well, that if you don't do that, but also if you're to adopt GS1 labels internally for all the products you produce, it also increases internal efficiency for these finished goods, reduces those errors, and you don't have to now add that GS1 label to that, that quote license plate or barcode that you have for those specific customers. But it also gives you what you need for blockchain technology.
Thank you, Jack. That brings us to our final poll question, audience members, and that question is on your screen. So that question is, have you implemented GS1 standards? So the options are yes, or in process, or it could be planned but not started, or it's a no. So go ahead and click on the option that suits you best. And I'll also like to remind everyone that you can still continue sending in questions using the questions module in your control panel. So go ahead and send all your questions for Jack as well. And I'll give you 10 more seconds to go ahead and vote for our final poll, and I'll go ahead and close it. Okay, and it seems like audience members have voted, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and share those results with you as well. So the results are as follows. At no was the majority of audience members vote at 47%, followed by yes and in process, which was a tie at 20%. And lastly, at 13%, it was planned but not started. Thank you for participating, audience members, and back to you, Jack.
Okay, thank you. So now let's conclude or continue and talk about how do we connect all the links in the chain to give us that form to fork traceability. And so blockchain is a great technology to do this. IBM has developed an application using blockchain technology called IBM Food Trust. This is by no means an advertisement for IBM Food Trust, but this is just an example that is already in the marketplace today that can be used. And they do provide several modules, so to speak, with their Food Trust module. This is an example of their tray screen. And depending upon what size monitor you're looking at, basically, you can see across the top, it says, what do you want to see? So this is showing the farm to store view, and it kind of shows a timeline across the top, going from the farms through the supply chain, through the stores, and shows each of the primary producers, the warehouses, the manufacturers, distributors, and the stores for this particular product with this. So you may be familiar with blockchain technology. If you're not, you might want to investigate what it does with this. There are different types of a blockchain. IBM is using what's called a permissioned blockchain, and blockchain is basically a digital ledger with this. And permissioned only allows people that are members or subscribers to this food trust to be able to log in, to add information, to view information with this. It provides, trust. It provides accountability and transparency in that traceability information from farm to fork with this. Each company uploads their transaction data. There are multiple methods of how this can be uploaded with this. This can be done through Excel spreadsheets. This can be you log into the portal, you can key it in. This can be done through APIs and web services, pulling transaction data from your system. But the information that you would log in would be things like supplier receipts with the supplier and the PO number, item number. This is where the G10, GS1 numbers come in very handy. If you're a food manufacturer, what are all the processing, all the ingredients that come together to produce the products that you produce, and what customers did you ship this to, including basic information with this. Each company has access to who can view their data. So you can restrict your competitors from seeing your information and seeing your data. It may be that it's only your customers and your customers' customers that maybe can see the information and data that you provide to this. So you have control over this, even though it is in a subscription service. But it gives complete visibility to both the downstream and upstream journey of a particular lot with this. So if we go back to the scenario that we're looking at, from the store back to the tomato paste factory, how does this solve this problem? How does this help out from this? So you can probably already think about it, that if each one of these nodes in the chain had subscribed to a blockchain technology such as IBM Food Trust, this now can become basically instant. The store or the distribution center could basically trace this back. There still need to be investigation with this, but could then trace this back, to the tomato paste manufacturer that we saw, as well as once that had been determined, could also instantly trace that forward into all destinations that lot of tomato paste had provided with that, providing full visibility throughout the supply chain, all the way from the fork, from the family eating their pizza in Atlanta, Georgia, back to the factory. In this case, we didn't have to go back to the farm because we found the problem was at one of the factories in the chain. But if we need to go back to the farm, it could have gone all the way back to the farm from this.
Well, thank you so much, Jack, for that wonderful presentation. And audience members, that does bring us to our Q&A portion of today's webinar, so you can still continue sending in questions. I've already received some questions, so I'll start off with those. So Jack, the first question is, how long does it take a food manufacturing company to implement a trace and recall system?
Okay. A lot of times that depends upon the company itself. We typically see most companies are in the 6 to 9 month time frame to implement a ERP system. This being a small to medium enterprise company, somebody in that $25 million to $250 million type organization. And it also depends as to what applications are they implementing all of the full financial applications to go along with this, or are they just implementing the operational piece of this? Do they have current procedures and current data which could reduce this? But that typical 6 to 9 months is typically a fairly good average for this.
Great. Thank you so much, Jack. Our next question is, how do you see blockchain traceability developing for fresh meat products?
Oh, wow, this is an interesting one. This is great. So fresh meat products, this is where typically these are catch weight type products. And with this, having the GS1 128 labels that has all the information, particularly the pack date, that has also the supplier lot number with this, and also the weight, is very advantageous. So as you're receiving in, if you're a receiver of meat from this, you can scan the individual cases with this. There's typically a pallet label, which is a different label format. And so by having all this information, you're able to maintain your inventory, able to maintain your traceability down at the individual case label. It's a lot of information, it's a lot of data that you're doing, but you're doing it very effectively and very efficiently. But now that you have this, it makes it very easy to take this data and now provide this into a blockchain solution from a traceability perspective.
Great. Thank you so much, Jack. And another interesting question from an audience member, and that question is, how do people go about changing all their labels to GS1 format?
Okay, so the first thing is you do have to get a GS1 company prefix. You do have to basically become a member of GS1. You then need to assign all of your item numbers. So hopefully your suppliers are already GS1 compliant, or you can influence your suppliers if they're not to become GS1 compliant. If you have a supplier, maybe it's a small supplier who's not, and whatever item number that you use for them, you would need to assign that as your item number under your company number and define those. You would need a label printing system or software that gave you the ability to print GS1 labels for goods that come in from suppliers that do not have GS1 labels, as well as printing your own GS1 labels. And you need a system, an inventory-based system that can scan and basically decode that GS1 label into what is the product and the lot and so forth with this. So that's kind of the basic steps with this. There are a number of companies that can assist with this, but GS1 is a great standard to utilize, basically not just in the food and beverage industry, but typically in every industry has standards for basically maintaining and tracking inventory.
Thank you so much, Jack. And we have time for one more question. So that question is, how does GFSI certification compare to or conflict with FSMA regulations?
Okay, I think they're very complementary, and one of the things we really haven't talked about today that we didn't have time for us to talk about HACCP, hazard analysis and critical control points. You know, that is really the foundation that food safety is built on. And when you look at a number of the USDA regulations that came up in the 90s for meat and poultry and dairy companies in the U.S. were based upon HACCP guidelines. The GFSI was based upon very similar HACCP guidelines, as well as the Food Safety Modernization Act. All is based upon prevention, which really goes back to HACCP. So I think it's very complementary. I think companies that were participating and had GFSI certification, it was very simple for them to transition or to also meet the FSMA regulations as well. So they're very complementary.
Great, thank you so much, Jack. And that does bring us to the end of the Q&A portion, but thank you everyone for all of those very interesting questions and Jack for answering all of those questions as well. But if you were unable to attend to your questions during the portion, the team at Aptean may try to follow up with you later on as well. And if you do have more lingering questions, you can also use this contact information to ask those questions. So that's sarah.neal@aptean.com. Go ahead and take it down so you can go ahead and send more questions as well. And to everyone participating in today's conference, thank you for being here. Thank you so much for taking your time out today. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event, and also feel free to share the recorded version of this webinar when it becomes available. And please join us in thanking Jack Payne for that fantastic presentation. We hope you found this conference informative. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.